the neighbors. My partner and I just moved into our new home, and it's honestly everything we've ever wanted. We even have a rescued cat named Luna. The only thing that felt off at first was the abandoned-looking house next door. The owner had started renovations but never finished, so the fence between our backyards was gone, leaving both our yards wide open. The house behind that one had a few young guys living there, and we'd occasionally see them take a shortcut through the abandoned yard to get to the street. We didn't think much of it at first. On our first night, we were chilling in our backyard when we saw a man staring at us from a window in the house behind ours. He wasn't even trying to hide it. His face was completely blank, and the dark room made it even creepier. We figured he was just curious about his new neighbors, but after half an hour of him just staring, we decided to go inside. The next few days were normal until one night we decided to sit in the garden again. We were enjoying the stars when we heard a noise. 3 men were standing in our yard, just staring at us. I asked, "Are you guys okay?" The youngest one, who looked about 29, was holding a big bag and offered us some stolen washing-up tablets, which we declined. He just smiled and they left. The strangest part was how they walked into our yard like they had every right to be there. We hoped it was a one-off, but it only got worse. They started coming into our yard more often and acting in ways that were clearly meant to intimidate us. Since my partner and I are both 20, we immediately thought they were trying to scare us. One day, I saw 2 police officers go into the abandoned yard next door, look around, and then leave. I figured the people next door were probably trouble. A few days later, the police came to our door and told us the men had been kicked out for antisocial behavior. We were so relieved. We thought things would finally get back to normal, but that feeling didn't last. One day, while I was in the bath, I heard a loud bang. I quickly got dressed and found my partner recording something from our spare bedroom window. She told me a man we'd never seen before pointed at our window. When he saw her, he ran toward our house, tried the door handle, then ran back to the abandoned house and started banging on the windows. We called the police, but the encounter left us completely shaken. A few nights later, we were in bed when we heard whistling, the kind men used to harass women. It was 2:16 a.m. We then heard someone tapping on our window. We checked our cameras, but they didn't record anything. The noises stopped shortly after, but we were too scared to sleep, so we stayed at my mom's. When we got back the next morning, our Ring doorbell had been ripped off and the SD card was gone. We knew who it was. The police told us to keep our doors and windows locked and warned us that removing the camera could mean they were planning something bigger. The whistling and banging continued for weeks. We made multiple police reports, but nothing was done. Then, 3 weeks later, we were in bed when we checked the live camera feed and saw a masked man in our yard. He was wearing a hood and his arms were spread wide, like he was imitating Jesus on the cross. He just stared up at our bedroom window with his head tilted. We froze. He spoke, but we couldn't hear what he said. He then walked to the other side of the street and stood there, staring at our house for about 30 minutes. We called the police again, but they said it wasn't illegal to stare at someone's property and dismissed the whole thing. We couldn't sleep for days. Then one night at 3:33 a.m., we got a notification. My partner checked the camera and there they were. 2 masked men coming from the side of our house, shining flashlights into our windows. One of them, the same man who had been harassing us, was holding what looked like a crowbar. For days, he would stand across the street, pointing and waving at our window, and every time we looked, he'd just stare. It was clearly meant to scare us, and it worked. We feel powerless. We've set up more cameras and record everything, but the harassment continues.
The Paranoia Project. I need to start this by saying I'm not crazy. I know how this is going to sound, but everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. It started about 3 months ago, after I broke up with my ex, Ryan. He was with me for almost 2 years, and the breakup was long overdue. Ryan wasn't violent, but he was controlling and manipulative. He'd do things like track my phone use and quiz me on my day to see if I'd give the same answers twice. After I left him, I changed my number, disabled my social media, and moved apartments. I thought I was in the clear. Then, one morning, I went to a coffee shop near my new place. The barista, a girl my age, smiled at me and said, "Good morning, sunshine." I froze. That was Ryan's nickname for me, one he used sarcastically whenever I was upset. I brushed it off as a coincidence, but it happened again a few days later. A rideshare driver, an older guy, asked me if I'd ever figured out what I was running from. A phrase Ryan had said to me word for word. It kept happening. A woman at the grocery store whispered, "You don't get to just disappear." A guy on the street said, "Still wearing your hair like that." A coworker hummed a song Ryan used to play when we argued. It wasn't their faces that freaked me out, it was the way they looked at me, like they knew me. Their eyes all had the same unsettling expression. I started thinking I was going crazy, so I messaged Ryan's sister, telling her to tell him to stop. I thought he'd hired a private investigator. But she texted back saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. Ryan's been in rehab for 6 weeks with no phone." I didn't believe her until I saw a picture she posted of him a week later, looking pale and holding a sobriety chip. It couldn't be him, at least not directly. But these strangers knew things they shouldn't. One night, I stayed late at work because I felt unsafe at my apartment. I walked home, headphones in, but with no music on so I could hear if anyone was following me. When I turned the corner onto my block, a young man with his hood up was sitting on the stoop across the street. He didn't look at me, but he said, "Cold out tonight, huh, sunshine?" I kept walking, went upstairs, and locked every bolt on my door. The next morning, I found my doormat flipped over. Underneath, it said, "You can change your face too if you want, but I'll still recognize you." I was so terrified, I threw up. I booked a hotel for the weekend and left my apartment without packing anything. Around 2 a.m. at the hotel, someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman with a blank, expressionless face staring directly at the door. The next morning, the front desk told me no one should have been on my floor since all the rooms were empty. That's when it clicked. These weren't random people, they were being sent. They were being fed details about me and given Ryan's phrases. I remembered a conversation from before our breakup about a forum he was on where people shared tactics. I don't remember the name, but it must have been a creepy, cult-like group. Ryan, or someone, must have hired people to say his words and mimic his behavior to ensure I was constantly reminded of him. It wasn't about him watching me, it was about making sure I never stopped watching for him. I moved again, went off social media, and even dyed my hair. It worked until last week. I was walking home from a bookstore and a woman passed me on the street and said, "Still hiding behind books, sunshine." She didn't even break her stride. I don't think this will ever stop. Maybe it's some sick, underground game. The constant paranoia is truly eating away at my mental health.
The jester. My family rarely travels, so everyone was surprised when my aunt proposed a trip to one of Michigan's Great Lakes. We rented a huge Airbnb for all 18 of us. It was right on the beach, with a second 2-story garage behind it for our large group. My 3 cousins and I were assigned to sleep there. The garage was outdated and neglected, with moldy bathrooms and stained sheets. My cousins refused to sleep there until we washed the sheets, so we did laundry all night. Around 2:37 a.m., we finally finished. While my cousins fell asleep, I stayed up doing schoolwork on my phone. I'm a light sleeper and was hyper-aware of my surroundings. Around 3 a.m., a loud bang hit the garage door. It sounded like someone had thrown their body against it. I sat up, startled, but my cousins didn't move. I tried to tell myself it was just wind, but the noise was too heavy. Then it happened again. The whole building shook. I was fully awake now. No animal or gust of wind could have done that. 20 minutes later, the third boom hit, and two of my cousins finally bolted upright. We all agreed it wasn't the wind. My cousin texted her mom, my aunt, who woke up my uncle. He ran outside to check the property. We were too afraid to move until we heard knocking. It was my uncle with my dad and a few of our male cousins. My uncle told us to grab our things and go to the main house. He said someone was on the property, and that's what made my heart sink. We all rushed out of the garage. Once inside the main house, most of the family was awake from all the commotion. My aunt explained that when my uncle went to investigate, she followed him. He shouted, "Hey!" at a man standing behind the garage. At that moment, the door to the main house slammed shut behind her, with no wind to explain it. My aunt feared someone had slipped inside, so she ran to wake my dad and cousins. My uncle then described what he saw. A man standing behind the garage, not hiding, just staring like he wanted to be seen. When my uncle called out, the man just walked away and vanished into thin air. He left no footprints, and the leaves on the ground didn't make a sound. My uncle is a serious, logical man, which made everything scarier. My brothers also found 2 Joker cards, one in the main house and one in the garage. One of my cousins pointed out that Jokers symbolize mockery, and the bangs happened around 3 a.m., the so-called devil's hour. Felt like we were being taunted. No one went back to the garage that night. We all squeezed into the main house. The second night, my mom was sleeping on a couch by the large windows when she woke up around 4 a.m. to footsteps on the porch. She didn't dare open her eyes. Then she heard someone trying to open the basement door, which had a weak lock. She rushed to the basement, but by the time she got there, no one was there, and all the boys were still fast asleep. That was our last night. We left the next day earlier than planned. On the way home, we couldn't stop talking about what had happened. When my mom found out I had been going downstairs alone to do laundry, she thought someone might have been watching me. The timing between my last trip downstairs and the banging sounds was too perfect. Some of us thought it was a neighbor trying to scare us away, but others believed it was something paranormal because of the Joker cards. My aunt pointed out that a normal person would have run when my uncle saw them, but this man just watched and then disappeared. We contacted the Airbnb host, who said she'd review the footage from the camera above the garage door, but we never heard back. It made us wonder if she knew the man or if he was a local. We didn't deserve what happened. This was our first family trip, and I hope it's not our last.